Hey folks, today's episode is brought to you by one of my favorite sponsors, sunsetlakesebede.com. Use the code LEFTISBEST. You get 20% off your entire order at Sunset Lake. Sunset Lake grows, harvests, they ship all of their craft Sebede products directly from its farm in northern Vermont near Burlington, straight to your door. You can skip the lines. Find your relief and relaxation at sunsetlakesebede.com. And the thing is, these guys up there, they believe that Sebede should not be a luxury. They ship it directly to you. There's no middlemen. There's no fancy schmancy sort of like corporate commercialization of their product. They've got all sorts of great products. They got tinctures that help you sleep, tinctures that help you relax, tinctures that help your pets relax. They have stuff like gummies to help you sleep, gummies with a little THC. They've got Sebede coffee and Sebede fudge and lotions and salves, all great products, all third-party tested. If you got something wrong with your order or you got questions about what product might be right for you, you call them. You're not going to be talking to a robot. You're going to be talking to a real person, and probably a happy person, because sunsetlakesebede.com has great business practices. They're mostly employee-owned. $20 minimum wage when they start to do some of their harvesting. You can create an account on Sunset Lake Sebede's website. You can start ordering reward points, earn 10% back on all your purchases. If you order over $75, your order is for free. They're movement partners. They've donated tens of thousands of dollars, anywhere from like UNRWA to Planned Parenthood to carceral reform and give directly. I mean, just on and on. Strike relief funds. Check them out. You're going to really like supporting this company, and you're going to really like their products. sunsetlakesebede.com. Use the code LEFTISBEST for 20% off. Now, time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday. Tuesday, Casual Tuesday. Wednesday, Casual Hump Day. Thursday, Casual Thurs. That's what we call it. And Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, September 19th. 2025. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, David Klion, columnist at The Nation, contributing editor at Jewish Currents. Talk about the rise of Bari Weiss, who's now in charge of everything. Also on the program today, Trump and his FCC chair celebrate their power and consolidation over and around the media. Meanwhile, Trump to fire U.S. attorney who wouldn't essentially frame New York Attorney General Letitia James. Speaking of New York State politicians, Lander, Bridgeport, other New York lawmakers arrested by ICE for insisting on visiting an ICE holding facility. Meanwhile, Charlie Kirk's widow named CEO of Turning Points USA. RFK Jr. vaccine panel to vote against advising a universal Hep B vaccine for children. Trump wants to reoccupy Afghanistan by retaking Bagram Air Base. At least 7 senators now seeking a resolution recognizing a Palestinian state as the push grows in Europe for recognition. Senate Republicans confirm a batch of 48 Trump cabinet nominees after their invoking of the Senate nuke option. Or I should say, nuking the Senate filibuster rule. And U.S. consumers in the top 10% of income distribution account for nearly 50% of spending in the country. 50% total. All this, more, on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is
Casual Friday. Welcome
Casual
back, Sam.
Friday. Thank you. Thank you for the condolences, folks. My uncle lived a very full life. Bunch of grandkids, bunch of great grandkids. And so I head back to central Massachusetts to spend some time with family and send him off. And so glad to be back. I don't know. I mean,
glad to have you.
You know, one thing, though, that came up as I was talking to people, the idea of living in an authoritarian state, so many people, I believe, out there are like, well, yeah, it does feel like that now, but, you know, it's not going to last. And I sort of feel like that is a problem. Because, like, even if we assume that the Republicans don't manage to gerrymander away a Democratic control of the House, which, I mean, frankly, it's a real possibility, folks. There does not seem to be much of a limiting, like a device to limit what Trump attempts to do. And a lot of what he's attempting to do, they've sort of found a successful a mechanism to do what he wants to do, and that is basically lording government services and government functions over the various entities that make decisions in our society. And we saw this in the case of Jimmy Kimmel and others. We see it in the case of Mahmoud Khalil, who may be deported to some random country because of his involvement with, frankly, between Colombia and pro-Palestinian protesters and supporters. But, you know, the time to worry about authoritarianism existing longer than you think it's just like as if it was going to automatically expire. The time to worry about this, I mean, frankly, was probably 6 months ago, 10 months ago, a year or two ago, maybe 10 years ago. But we're there now. This is what it feels like, where people are self-censoring, where people are afraid, where people, you know, you have trans folks who are like, I'm trying to figure out how to get out of the country because my literal health and life and liberty is in already concrete terms, not just threatened, but in fact impaired. Down the road, those threats are there. Down the road, it could be even worse. And it's also the case for a whole cohort of people. I don't know if you got that video too, Brian, I put in about that 80-year-old. Maybe you guys played that.
Yeah, it's in there.
Okay. I mean, we are living in an authoritarian society now. There's just not, that's not hyperbole. It is just simply the case. Now, are there ranges within that authoritarianism? Of course. But we have crossed the threshold. When people are afraid, and we're talking about the law firms, we're talking about the universities, we're talking about corporations, we're talking about individuals, where the vice president of the United States gets on a radio show and says, go get people fired for not showing enough deference to someone associated with the administration. I'm sorry. That's what authoritarianism is.
And I've been thinking a bit about how leadership and folks in power have an effect on the rest of society. I mean, we've lived under Trump, this specter over our politics for around 10 years at this point. And it's not just Trump. I mean, it's obviously what we're seeing with Israel committing genocide, even Russia taking the opportunity to invade Ukraine, where there is a complete breakdown enabled by the failures of liberalism economically, in the liberal international order as well, in which might makes right, and that comes home to us eventually. And it also is interesting to me how the nation's like almost character and the way it interacts with the world is reflected too in what you're describing, this people not being able to fully contemplate this happening to us. So that's what happens in other countries. That's maybe what we do to other countries. But that can't come home to us. And the other leadership that has enabled this is the Democratic Party, that has not met the moment in any capacity, that has capitulated over and over again to this. And that level of weakness also has an effect and doesn't give people the oxygen to resist in the way that they were doing in 2016 post, right? Like, for all of our issues about the resistance and, hey, I thought there was too much focus on Russia, less focus on material issues. There was some people being cringe, God forbid, whatever. I would love for some more earnestness back in our society once again. But that showed that we did limit him the first time to a degree. I mean, he did a lot of damage, but the leadership from Democrats fighting him on everything had an impact.
I mean, part of that also was just that they weren't as prepared to do what they're doing as they are this time. I mean, Project 2025, incidentally, the FCC chair wrote the communication section on in Project 2025. A lot of this stuff is part of that playbook. So, you know, the Trump and his minions are far more prepared this time around to run this playbook. But it is the case, and we'll play a clip from Chuck Schumer where he's starting to show at least setting the table maybe for a government shutdown. But understand, he enabled this. He is 8 months too late on this. And even still, he's out there, you know, bemoaning Jimmy Kimmel getting fired, bemoaning the actions of the FCC chair. But up until days ago was, and maybe still is, 100% earnestly trying to figure out some type of fig leaf deal that Republicans would sign on to, that he could pretend like he got something so that he could fund this government that is doing all of these bad things that he's talking about. Right? I mean, like, it is a completely, and even still, and we will give him a modicum of credit for at least like maybe setting the table for a government shutdown. But still, the framing of it is still just sort of like they're living in 1995.
How about the optics of being somebody who had his statement on Mahmoud Khalil's detention was very mealy-mouthed, but now that a wealthy white liberal entertainer is impacted, which, want to be clear, this is an enormously scary moment and it's an attack on the First Amendment, and obviously we support Kimmel and his staff, but does the Democratic Party, it doesn't help their disconnect from the average voter when this is when he decides to basically take a stand here, and not the people that were being punished for their speech in the first 9 months of this administration.
Or even the last administration.
Right.
Like
even,
this McCarthyite
even then.
period started under the Democrats.
Look, the fact is that the entire hysteria, and I'm not saying that there is an anti-Semitism in our society. I've experienced it as a child. I've experienced it as an adult. It exists. I have a long list, but the hysteria as a way of trying to silence protest about what Israel is doing and ginning up the anti-Semitism, that set up everything that happened in terms of Trump going after these universities. That set up everything that Trump did in terms of going after these law firms. That has been used now as and it's ironic in many respects, but it has been used on Khalil, used on a graduate student who's just writing an op-ed in Massachusetts.
Yep.
I mean, on and on. And once it is used under the cover of anti-Semitism, suddenly that tool, people are very, very comfortable swinging that hammer around in other contexts. So, I mean, so much, and to the point where, like, he funds the government. And I do mean Chuck Schumer funded the government because it was his, group of 7 senators that broke the filibuster. He funds the government, and just like as if to just sort of illustrate what we're talking about, because he's got to go out on book tour for his book about anti-Semitism.
Pro-Israel, his number one job, according to him.
Yep. And so all of this is tied in. But the point being, we're at a point now where there's 2 things that are clear. Or I should say, one thing is clear. We're living within an authoritarian, our country is under authoritarian rule. And that doesn't mean it can't get a lot worse. It surely can. But things aren't trending in the right way. And so there's really, like, 2 things we have to do simultaneously. One is we have to fight that authoritarianism. And there's a whole myriad ways of doing that. Starting with, like, expand your social circle, organize, just like you're not doing anything like directly, but you are building the relationships because, Sam Harris once called me or said my behavior was psychopathic because we were going after a Dave Rubin like he was the wounded elk or something like this, or caribou. And
wounded antelope, according to Rogan.
Antelope, right. And the idea being, we pull apart the IDW folks one person at a time. And there was definitely, we weren't that, I think, calculating about it, but that's how it's done. If you can find people who are isolated, much easier to take them out. If the administration can show that they can take out Jimmy Kimmel, he'll be fine. Then it sends a message to everybody else that you are much more vulnerable. So organizing either in the context of your workplace, in your apartment building, just in your neighborhood, amongst your friends, that's really important. Standing up in situations like ICE, protecting vulnerable people in your community, immigrants, trans folk, whomever it is, that's important. Standing up to authoritarianism when you see it sends a message to other people that it's doable. And then the other half of what needs to be done is we need to have a political leadership that addresses the moment and has the ability and the competence to do so. And we don't have that. So, it may seem inconsistent to both say we've got to develop some type of social cohesion to push back against the authoritarianism on one hand, and on the other hand, be critical of political leaders who fail to meet the moment, even though ostensibly they are on our side in the sense that they're most likely to be the vehicle for our set of policies that we want. But you need competence, right? I mean, that's important.
And not being corrupted. I mean, how do you create more competent democratic leadership? You make them more responsive to the democratic will of the people, right? And that's what the critique. I think a lot of people are coming around to this notion that it's not about criticizing Democrats for clicks or for the sake of doing so. It's because there's a recognition amongst folks like us that the Democratic Party at this moment in history is the party that in our two-party system that has to get elected to combat this. But we can't just elect them for the sake of it, because we saw what that looked like, right? It's not durable. It's not long lasting if you just run in opposition to one guy.
You have to cultivate democracy and do things to cultivate it, just like the Republicans do things to cultivate fascism.
And they cultivate it by being responsive to their own base. Because in this era of explosion of dark money, post-Citizens United, where everybody knows our politics are undemocratic and they see it on their phones because no one understands why the F this genocide is still going on, for example. And they see our government doing unspeakable things. That's why Epstein is a stand-in for like a level of democratic responsiveness, because people basically feel like this is all they can ask. We have such little civic engagement. Trump has helped kill it, but also a Democratic Party that didn't bring anybody into a primary process with this last election.
Missed the cost of living stuff.
Well, that
and
I think is
just talks around and talks down and tries to manipulate the base from the top and cuts off the over 90% of their base right now that say, we don't support what's happening. We don't want to fund Israel anymore. How can you be an opposition party that that has effectiveness when you are not democratic in the smaller, lowercase version of democracy?
It just ends up being a failure. I mean, they specifically told their canvassers, don't send us information as to what voters are saying about Gaza and Israel. Like, that is the point. The point of being a small d Democrat or democratic is because you work more not necessarily efficiently, but better ultimately. But if you are literally saying we're not going to record comments on this major issue because we don't want to know, we know, and so we don't want any proof that we know. And they buried their heads in the sand, and then they missed the ball on the economy. And Trump is also missing the ball on the economy. I think broadly speaking, our society, or at least our media, is missing the ball on the economy. Let's look at this clip number. We're going to get to David Klion in a few minutes. But here is clip number 10. And this is going to be helpful. This is going to be helpful, hopefully, in the event that there are elections in 26 and 28. But this is number 10.
Going to feel that because we do see polling that doesn't poll well in the economy. The recent Fox polling said 52% say the economy is worse under this administration. You've got unemployment at the highest rate in 4 years. Groceries made a big jump in the last term. So how is that? You're looking forward with these plans that you just talked about. When will people feel that, Mr.
Well,
Trump?
when the factories start opening. I mean, right now we're building them. And, Fox polling, I have to tell you, I've told you before, it's the worst polling I've ever had. It's always, during the election, they had me winning by a little bit, not by a massive amount. And
can you
Fox
pause it?
polling,
You didn't win by a massive amount. You didn't get to 50% in the popular vote.
What? Okay. Bleeding
Somebody's
from
been listening
everywhere.
to Fox polling.
Somebody's been listening to
Murdoch.
Okay. Viglin polling.
Roberta Murdoch.
Okay.
Worst polling I've ever seen them. And, Fox polling, I have to tell you, I've told you before, it's the worst polling I've ever had. It's always, during the election, they had me winning by a little bit, not by a massive amount. And Fox polling, I've told Rupert Murdoch, go get yourself a new pollster because he stinks. And this is
Going to feel that.
Did you tell him that in the litigation when you were suing him in court because the Wall Street Journal accurately reported on you signing Jeffrey Epstein's birthday book? What's the status of that, by
What
the
is a
way?
birthday book? I never even heard of a birthday book.
Yeah, I'm actually born on a leap year.
My understanding is it's birthday card.
Card? Book?
Who does
Oh, okay.
books?
Now it's a full book? Well, I'm confused.
Okay, JR
but
token.
his refusal to accept where the economy is at this point is going to be helpful down the road. The economy itself is not going to be helpful. It's going to be painful for people because it's going to get worse. But here's put up 10A just to give an idea of where his polling is on this.
Yep.
It's bad.
So this is comparing the economy in his first term versus the second term, and you can see he's minus 22 at this point versus basically having positive numbers the entire time his first term. He dipped below a little bit towards the beginning of his presidency, but even at the end there with COVID, I guess there was the subsidies that were coming out at that time.
He's fallen off a cliff.
But the checks and things like that.
This is his net
magazines-
approval handling of the economy. It is minus 22. He's in bad shape. But here is what's going on with the economy. And this this is what the Biden people missed. And we talked about this, but there's now like much more data to support this theory, which is that we have two essentially economies in this country. We have one that exists for rich people, and its numbers obscure what the rest of the country is going through. So here is this. This is clip 11. This is from the BLS. And there's a story in Bloomberg that outlines this as well. Consumers in the top 10% of income distribution, and this shows essentially like the top 20%. Top 20% and the top, I guess, 4%. The economy is like their spending is just keeps going up and up and up. And it's basically flat for the rest of the 80% of the country. Consumers in the top 10% of the income distribution accounted for 49.2% of total spending in the second quarter. That is the highest since a blip in 1989. Do we have that other graph? I don't think so. Maybe it was
Here it is.
Yeah, here it is. You can see this. Look at where you had about 1/3 of the spending, essentially 1/3 of the economy was a function of the top 10% in income distribution in this country back in 1992. And now it's 50%.
Well, I blame immigrants and trans people.
It's all the rich immigrant and trans people who are up there, pushing up the economy for just them and hiding the fact of what's going on in the 80% of this country. And so when you have 10% of the country providing 50% of the economic activity, when you have 20% providing probably close to 80% of the economic activity, maybe 75% of the economic activity, all of the measures that we have used traditionally to measure the health of the economy give you skewed numbers. Your GDP, whatever it is, it gives you skewed numbers. And, at one point it may catch up, but it certainly destabilizes society, and it certainly makes for the vast majority of Americans to be unhappy. And the idea that like the Biden administration couldn't figure this out, and now obviously the Trump administration doesn't, I don't even know if they care, is a problem for the bottom line is like you have 80% of Americans for whom the economy doesn't work.
It's crazy that, decades of tax cuts has led to just a incredibly imbalanced economy and
Wealth
lack of public
inequality.
investment.
This is a wealth inequality story. This is concentrating wealth at the top. And it's incredibly destabilizing, as just a broad, it can lead to things like, I don't know, fascism, authoritarianism, etc.
There'll be a little disturbance.
A little.
But we're okay with that.
And by the
Won't
way,
be much.
Oh, sorry.
All right, we've got to get
I forgot
to.
it keeps going. But can I just say, tax cuts, big ugly ass bill. It hasn't even hit yet, which is going to pronounce this situation.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to get much, much worse.
Yeah.
And we're about to crash into a massive bump in health insurance costs. Massive. In a moment, we're going to be talking to David Klion. He's written a piece in, I think it was in The Guardian about, can't even remember her name now again.
Bari Weiss.
Bari Weiss essentially taking over our country, but more what she's indicative of too, I think. First, couple words from our sponsors. One of our sponsors today is Delete Me. They're a great service. I've been using it for over 10 years. It makes it easy and quick and safe to remove your personal data from the web at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everybody vulnerable. Look, it's super easy to find personal information online. Data brokers compile this stuff. They sell it. You get a monthly subscription. You can get as much as you want. And phishers and scammers, they combine that information with information they find on the dark web. They will send you phishing emails and scam you that way. They'll steal your identity, et cetera, et cetera. Really a problem. And then, of course, in an authoritarian era like we're living in, frankly, you want to go online and say your piece about various people. You want to do so without feeling like your information is just hanging out there. This is why it's been a service that I've been using for like I say, at least 10 years. And what they do is they keep at it. Info brokers repopulate their sites. Delete Me takes it down. Then they send you a monthly report that gives you a breakdown of what they've done. I want to thank Delete Me for sponsoring the Majority Report. Tell you can take control of your data in your private life. Keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. It's now at a special discount for our listeners. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/majority. Use the promo code majority at checkout. Only way to get 20% off, go to joindeleteme.com/majority. Enter the code majority at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/majority. Code is majority. This one you may want to bring Emma back on for because people will laugh at potty jokes. I'm not sure if you know about that, Emma. But second, we need to talk to a doctor about our bottom half. They clam up. Bidets normalize talking about your bottom half. Health while making bathroom visits so much more comfortable. I love my Tushy. It was my Tushy bidet.
That's a new drop.
Yeah, thank you. I got a Tushy. I don't know. Was it during COVID? I think it was just at the end of COVID. I can't remember, but it just screws onto your existing toilet, and it's been great. They've upgraded these over the years, and now they have one that's electric, which is like that's my retirement gift I'm hoping to get. Tushy.
In it to win it.
Tushy is the everyday luxury bidet that instantly transforms your bathroom habits and bottom health for life. Tushy Wave instantly modernizes your daily routine with a super sleek plus 2 separate front and rear nozzles for the most complete clean. It also features a soft close lid, and that's slam-proof for a gentle, luxurious finish. Every Tushy bidet attaches easily to your existing toilet without the need for additional plumbing. This is a daily decadence with practical benefits. Tushy pristinely removes 99% of bacteria while protecting your natural skin barrier thanks to one natural ingredient, fresh water. Look, folks, when your hands get dirty, you don't just take a towel and rub it around. Use water. It's also easy to use. Sit, clean, cleanse, and dry using the built-in dryer. That's right. Cleaning yourself after using the bathroom is now hands-free. Every Hello Tushy bidet comes with a 30-day hassle-free return, 12-month warranty. Want to thank Tushy for sponsoring this episode and my use of a bidet. Remember, a-hole is only a dirty word if you wipe. Jeez, for a limited time, our listeners get 10% off their first bidet order when you use the code TMR at checkout. That's 10% off your first bidet order at hellotushy.com, promo code TMR. Quick break. When we come back, David Klion, columnist at The Nation and contributing editor at Jewish Currents. We'll put all that ad info in the podcast and YouTube description. See you in a moment. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report here with Emma Vigeland. Joining us now, David Klion, columnist at The Nation, contributing editor at Jewish Currents. Just written a big piece in The Guardian. I guess it was a week ago. I don't know, a couple of days ago.
About a week.
David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So you go into the merger essentially of Skydance and Paramount, which happened. Go too deeply into that, but that is another opportunity for these corporate consolidation of our media, corporate subservience to the Trump administration. And there's sort of like a almost like a bonus aspect to this in terms of Bari Weiss and the question of Israel and Gaza. I mean, Bari Weiss, give us just a rundown for folks who don't know who Bari Weiss is. Give us a rundown on who she is, because she is a fascinating figure and sadly, increasingly an influential one, or going to be in our politics and our media.
Yeah, I often forget that there are people who don't know who she is. In my world of gossipy New York media, she's kind of inescapable. Bari Weiss is reportedly going to be the incoming, it's not exactly clear what the job title is, but let's say senior advisor to whoever runs CBS News, coming out of this huge merger you talked about. CBS is owned by Paramount, so now it's owned by Paramount Skydance. There are rumors about who might be running CBS, but Bari Weiss will be whispering in that person's ear. Currently, she is the founder and editor of The Free Press, which is a Substack-based digital media publication that she started 4 years ago, about a year after her notorious self-firing from the New York Times, where she had been an opinion editor and writer. And before that, she was at the Wall Street Journal and Tablet. Before that, she
got too woke for her at the Times.
Yeah, things got too woke for her at the Times. She did resign. She did not get fired, but she had become a lightning rod for criticism. And she had been hired by James Bennett, who was the former editor of The Atlantic and then became the editor of New York Times Opinion, who was essentially forced to resign after this incident in the summer of 2020, when New York Times op-ed published Senator Tom Cotton saying there should be military deployments against Black Lives Matter protesters. This was, the famous summer of 2020, George Floyd, peak woke, some on the right would say. And so Bari Weiss resigned not long after Bennett did, voluntarily, and had a sort of a blistering open letter to the New York Times saying it had become censorious and woke and hostile to people with different political viewpoints. And she went out to sort of prove the liberal establishment that she had done very well in wrong. And it's hard to argue she hasn't succeeded. The Free Press became a massive success, both with a large paid subscriber base and larger unpaid subscriber base, and also venture capital backers going up to the top rungs of Silicon Valley and including people who funded Donald Trump's return to the presidency, like Mark Andreessen.
Right. And I just want to say, like, too, this was also cancel culture as well, right? Like, that's what she was riding, and she was unable to be actually canceled and fired from the Times. So she had to self-cancel to victimize herself to create this kind of branding for the so-called free press. And given what we're seeing right now with the authoritarian president actually cracking down on free speech in these wildly illegal ways, I think it paints a new light or sheds a new light on the branding that these like right-wing figures, but she has an NPR voice, so she hides it, but like that they cynically used at that point. And in the face of actual crackdowns on free speech, you see where she lands.
Well, here's where I should be a little fair to Bari. I try to be fair, because my piece makes the case, which I stand by completely, and which no one has corrected any facts on, that Bari has, despite originally branding herself as a never Trumper back in 2016, and despite the official, categorization of the free press as kind of heterodox, non-ideological, non-partisan, has overall had a very clear pro-Trump slant. And in particular, in terms of, I focused on the ways that she's used the free press over the last 10 months to sort of carry water for the Trump administration's efforts to suppress speech, especially at university campuses, in media orgs like NPR, and very likely soon in CBS. But in fairness, and of course this is happening, I don't know if I can claim credit or not, but a week after my piece was published, Bari has actually come out saying that Trump's latest moves, the FCC's moves to sort of blackmail Jimmy Kimmel off the air, she opposes that. How she squares that circle with how she's been acting to date is an interesting question that I can speculate about. But I do have a theory for.
He's not a brown person.
Well, wait, I do want you to speculate that, but I think the answer probably lies somewhere in the notion of she got her start at Columbia University as a student, literally doing like the TPUSA equivalent of professor watch lists. I mean, that was literally how she got her start, was to try and get professors at Columbia. And this is years ago. I mean, she's, what is she, like in her early 40s now? I mean,
Yeah,
this must have been
both 41.
Yeah, so this must have been, well, you tell me, when you were at Columbia. I mean, so you were aware of this as a student, I would imagine.
Less than you would think, and I'm a little embarrassed about this. Partly, I think, because I was studying abroad at the height of it. Partly because I just wasn't as active on campus as I might have been if I could do college over. And so I heard, when I think I first got to know Bari, who was the class behind me, even though we were the same age. I think she'd taken a gap year in Israel, which Israel being a major part of Bari's interests since the beginning. I think I knew there had been a controversy around her, but I didn't really know the details. And, if it were me today, I certainly would have thought to look into them, but I think I was wrapped up in other things. And we were friendly. But in hindsight, I know, for instance, she was being funded by an Israeli think tank called the Shalem Center, which is associated with the national conservative Yoram Hazony, basically a fascist intellectual who backs Netanyahu. This was 20 years ago. But even then, I mean, she was playing ball with them and was one of a handful of students at elite campuses around the country. This was reported, I don't know, a decade or more ago in the Forward, I think. So there's a long history of Bari.
And to be clear, she was essentially trying to drive professors out of the university who she felt were espousing pro-Palestinian information, facts, opinions, whatnot.
I believe she has maintained, when pushed on the obvious hypocrisy here, when she later became this free speech champion, that she wasn't trying to get anyone fired. She was just trying to call attention to real incidents of anti-Semitism against students on campus. I mean, Bari's very clever about this, and she slices these distinctions very finely. And I think with what's going on this week with the FCC, which is obviously I'm sure we all agree, an urgent crisis for basic press freedoms in this country, and the Constitution. I think that the line she is drawing is you shouldn't directly use the federal government and the hammer of the FCC to try to drive speech off TV. But in fact, as she said in the editorial, I assume she penned for the Free Press and shared on Twitter, it would have been fine if ABC fired Jimmy Kimmel of its own volition. But I should say it's not totally clear if they fired him or just indefinitely suspended him as we record this. But I think she thinks that, or she's maintaining that it would have been fine for them to fire him over the anodyne thing he said. But the fact that the FCC chair is saying that's unacceptable makes it a threat to free speech, which is a very, very fine distinction.
I mean, I would agree with that. I think as far as it goes, because I think that is the difference between what is unconstitutional and what is just, if ABC says we're firing you because of this, the audience in that instance has the opportunity to influence that decision, right? I mean, people can say like, I'm boycotting, but when they're doing it because the FCC has pressured them, or and frankly, we saw it in the context of Skydance, in Paramount, when they are acting in a way that is essentially a soft bribe, right? Like we're going to do X, Y, or Z so that you give the approval for this acquisition or merger or whatnot. It's also almost the exact same mechanism. It's just the sort of like opposite side of it. One is the forehand and one is the backhand, right, in terms of like a government influence. We should also say, just so that we have a complete a sense of who Bari Weiss is, she is the one who created the IDW, the intellectual dark web, where
popularized it anyway.
I don't know if they would self-identified before then.
I think it was a phrase they were tossing around, but she wrote the big, hilarious New York Times feature that sort of put them on the map.
The photo shoot of them in the dark, magical forest.
We should also say is completely self-negating. Like the idea that these people were relegated to the darkest corners of the web. First of all, we all knew their names beforehand. They all had massive platforms, and they were being platformed in the New York Times. The idea that they were not allowed to do what they were doing was completely like.
Well, and she presented them as she often does herself in her publication, as heterodox, classical liberals with different views on things, but virtually to a person, the names that she was highlighting are right-wing influencers, or have turned out to be, in many cases, hard right influencers. I mean, there's a clear valence when she does this. Bari Weiss is not surfacing people who turn out to be on the left.
There is one thing. I mean, there is a little bit of divergence between Harris and the rest of those, but there is one consistent element with all those people. They are all Islamophobic.
Yes.
They have all had a long-standing problem with Muslims,
and mostly transphobic too, right? I mean,
I think probably Harris less so, but I'm not sure. I don't really follow what he's doing these days, but certainly, they're all anti-Muslim.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a real through line in Bari's work. One thing she's always had a knack for, though, is positioning herself as acceptable to, I guess you could say, the center left, to sort of, mainstream Democrats of the sort who would have been happy at Slate in the 90s or early aughts, right? Or people like Andrew Sullivan, who are like a bit right of center, but kind of eclectic. She's always been very comfortable in that world, and very acceptable at places like Harvard and Columbia, and the New York Times previously. And at the same time, she has all these ties to sometimes wildly conspiratorial right-wing figures, especially coming out of Zionist and Israeli circles. I mean, Tablet, which shaped her, has gone from being a kind of centrist or even center-left publication a decade ago to being a really feverishly conspiratorial right-wing site now. And she's still, I think, tight with everyone involved there. So the Bari, I would say a major function of hers is kind of laundering far-right positions into the mainstream.
Well, in fact, that's what you said in your piece. What is less well understood about Bari Weiss is how she has used the free press to empower right-wing factions within established elite institutions, and how her efforts have been turbocharged by Trump's return to the White House. I mean, she is like analogous to what Drudge did back in the aughts, where he would launder information from the right-wing fever swamps into the mainstream media. But now what she does is not just sort of launder the information, because they don't have that as much. What she's doing now is ends up being, I think, as you describe here, as almost like a hammer within taking over of these institutions. It's no longer about feeding a narrative, because they don't need to do that anymore. Now it's like literally a sort of jump the divide and assault the narrative making machine of the mainstream.
Right. I mean, imagine if Matt Drudge had been put in charge of a major news broadcaster or in a senior advisory role at a major news broadcaster, and his blog acquired for, they're saying something like $150 million by a major media conglomerate. I mean, it's just, we're in uncharted territory here. Drudge was always understood to be a kind of like outside muckraker figure who developed a certain informal relationship with mainstream media. But Bari is going to be the mainstream media,
right?
In the Trump 2.0 era, which is very frightening, I think, not least because CBS News has actually run some, I think, tough coverage on Israel sometimes. There have been 60-minute segments that have been, and there's the, Tony DeKuppel, of course, was asking very tough and pointed questions of Ta-Nehisi Coates, but still, Ta-Nehisi Coates was on the air, and there were people in CBS brass apparently who weren't happy with how DeKuppel did that, and were apologetic about it to staff. Bari, as I show in the piece, broke that story at the time. It was about a month before the 2024 election, and essentially cast a light on CBS as this terribly woke place, which is crazy when you consider that Tony DeKuppel, was the one doing that interview in the first place and saying the things he was saying. But now she's going to come on, presumably with an eye to push it to the right, especially on Israel, probably on other topics too. And yeah.
Can you expand a little bit on Larry Ellison's son, David Ellison, who is the founder of Skydance and also is kind of leading this effort a little bit? I mean, the timeline of how this merger came to be overlaps obviously with CBS, Paramount settling the lawsuit over the 60-minute segment that Trump didn't like, and then canceling Colbert. And then what do you know? This merger is approved with one of Trump's benefactor's sons leading the effort. And Larry Ellison, did he eclipse Elon Musk, at least temporarily, last week as the richest man on the planet? What is their relationship like? Because my understanding is he's also a massive Zionist.
That is my understanding too. I am not an expert on David Ellison or Larry Ellison, and I think we're all going to start learning a lot more about them as they conquer our media. I understand that Larry Ellison supported Trump. I understand that they're Zionists and that they ideologically align with Bari. And I don't think it's a surprise they're bringing her on, given that. I know that what's particularly alarming right now is that he's having just conquered Paramount, which includes CBS and Viacom, so MTV, Comedy Central, and other things. He's he's also just part of this group that's taken over TikTok in the United States that Andreessen is also involved in. And he's apparently looking to buy Warner Brothers Discovery, which would mean he would also control CNN, HBO. I mean, this is all off the top of my head, so correct me if I'm wrong about any of this. But basically, it sounds like he's threatening to take over half of media, and he's rich enough that maybe he could actually do that. Like, are they possibly going to find a better bidder than him? And you think about that, and then you think about what's going on with Disney this week and the FCC, and it's a very, very frightening time when, in a past life, my work was more focused on Russia and the former Soviet Union than it is now. And as cringe as this kind of stuff sounds, and as much as everyone rolls their eyes at any connection between Putin and Trump now, or any analogy between them, like, this is kind of how it started in Putin's Russia in like year one, and in other countries like Hungary too. Like they essentially use regulatory levers and carrots and sticks to kind of bully any critics off the air. A comedian who might make fun of the president in puppet form or something like that. And they make sure that every TV station ends up in the hands of regime loyalist oligarchs. And I mean, it's happening before our eyes right now. It's very, very unsettling. And Bari, although she is currently coming out against the most egregious example to date of it with the FCC, is a part of this. I mean, the fact that she is about to be brought on by CBS is a part of these exact maneuvers, and is part of the same process that, for instance, kicked Colbert off.
And let's be clear too, like, where all of these characters play their roles, right? Like, I mean, she is, whether consciously or not. I mean, I know that she perceives herself as an Esther figure, in referencing the story of Purim, where the king was being convinced by people by Haman, an advisor, to kill the Jews, and Esther came and was secretly a Jew and was married to the king and saved her people. Like,
can you tell us how you know that Bari sees herself that way? It sounds plausible, but how does she know that? How do you know that?
People in attendance to a birthday party. She was heralded.
Juicy detail you're breaking here. I like it.
Heralded as an Esther figure. I mean, this is
amazing.
And so
creepy a little bit. We have evangelical Christians in this country that talk like this, and we accurately describe what they are. So yeah.
It's creepy. But putting that aside, her other function, I think, is, almost like Tom Friedman in Selling the Iraq War. There is a cohort of people who do not perceive themselves as, sort of a MAGA person. And, this is a bone to that sort of quadrant of her supporters, and a way that makes her, somewhat reasonable. Now, of course, if she's going into news media, of course, I mean, it's not that hard to say, I don't think the FCC should be interfering with networks. But everything else that is being laundered here, and this era, like, when we say, like, it's a scary time, I almost am like starting to have concern that by even assuming that it's going to end, by saying time at this point, like, this is just, I've just spent the week with a lot of like sort of normies who are, sort of like, well, when the election comes, hopefully, and yeah, maybe.
Well, actually, it's funny because when she said this yesterday, last night, Bari also said, part of how first of all, I think you're completely right that Bari sees herself as sort of maintaining a tent that stretches from the center
river to the sea.
Yeah, from the center to the far right, and she needs to keep everyone happy in the tent. So she does occasionally, punch right a little bit. That is part of her MO, and it is part of how she's gotten this far. But also, she said yesterday, sort of making the case to MAGA, what do you think will happen if we have a Democratic president who can then abuse the same authority? And I thought that was kind of doubly optimistic. First of all, that we're going to have another Democratic president, which, hope so. And second of all, that if we were to have another Democratic president, that it would ever occur to them to play the kind of hardball that the right routinely plays right now.
Right.
For instance, during the Biden or Obama administrations, they would say, no, it's all fair play. They wouldn't use the FCC this way. I don't think they would put regime allies on TV.
No, I mean, and frankly, like, they won't even threaten now that they will. I mean, really, this is an aside.
Asymmetric fight, as we know.
It's very asymmetric, and frankly, I think one of the things that people are starting to realize that they're going to have to demand of their Democratic politicians to be public and articulate that there will be accountability for this down the road. So that there is something to sort of put the brakes on. But let me, since you brought it up, let's sort of delve a little bit into your experience in reporting and thinking about Russia in that turn to that, sort of like more controlled authoritarianism. What were there instances where you could see from an academic perspective that things could have gone in a different direction?
That's a very interesting question. I am hard pressed to think of a time in the last, the obvious answer, I guess, would be the Bolotnaya Square uprisings in, I think it was 2012 or thereabouts. There was a moment Putin came to power at the end of 1999, beginning of 2000, basically handpicked and very quickly consolidated his authority. But things were a little looser in the first decade, which was actually the time I was living and working in Russia in 2007. Things were a little bit looser then than they've subsequently become. There was a fair amount of personal freedom. There was opposition media. It just wasn't on the big networks. You could start a little magazine or a radio station or something that would reach a more, let's say, NPR type audience, but probably on a smaller scale than exists in the US. And that wasn't a real threat to the regime. People traveled, people had friends abroad, people, felt that they could go to protests. And then when Putin had, served 2 constitutional presidential terms, that's what he was entitled to, and then became the prime minister, and Dmitry Medvedev, who at least at the time presented as a kind of, Western-friendly liberal face, was the president. And there was a lot of for a 4-year term, and there was a lot of speculation about, well, is Putin going to gradually move things in a more liberalizing direction? Then after Medvedev's term was up, Putin said he was going to return to the presidency and basically change the constitution. And at that point, there were gigantic street protests of essentially Russia's professional class millennial generation, especially in Moscow and other major cities. And those, they flared for a little bit. They got brutally put down. Some people went to jail. Putin has moved, I would say, ideologically and in terms of the substance of his authoritarian rule, much further, I guess you could say, to the right since then. And then, of course, the war in Ukraine has sort of made that even worse. Censorship is extremely oppressive now, and huge numbers of people of that would-be liberal, cosmopolitan cohort have left. The huge expat communities have formed outside of Russia because people just don't really see a future there. Now, we're not Russia, and I think for one thing, there's Putin has genuinely had majority support probably the whole time he's been in power, though it's hard to know exactly how much. Whereas, Trump probably hovers around half the population, give or take. I think his popularity is falling. This is a very divided country with a much deeper liberal democratic tradition than Russia has. So I don't want to say it's all going to go exactly the way it's gone in Putin's Russia. It probably won't. But these are very worrying signs. It's definitely a playbook, and it shouldn't be limited to Russia. There are definitely, I guess the political science term is elected authoritarian governments all over the world that, still hold elections and still maintain some of the outward functioning of the constitutional order, but have basically rigged the whole game for permanent right-wing populist rule.
I've seen this compared to Orban and the
Orban in
tactics.
Hungary,
I mean, he's used very similar tactics recently on the media. But I am curious about, in some of my kind of darkest moments about this. I think about, we had Gil Duran on to talk about his reporting on Silicon Valley and the network state and what these like Silicon Valley oligarchs anticipate in terms of consolidating power. And I believe that Peter Thiel knows Trump is old and in bad health, and he has a servant who owes his entire career basically to him in J.D. Vance, who could ascend. And my concern is that they are putting these mechanisms in place to create a structure for Democratic opposition not to even matter if Trump is out of the picture too, because he dies of natural causes, obviously. And so like that's where we get into this terrifying territory where I think we can talk about the consolidation of our media by these same tech guys like Larry Ellison, Oracle, and such. They're all in the fold.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I don't think this ends with Trump at all. Not that he's necessarily going anywhere soon, but and I think I think the right that will succeed him is illiberal to its core, has jettisoned any pretense of God, I don't know, the 20th century Republican Party. Not that I want to romanticize that, but it is very much in line with Thiel's kind of post-democratic thinking, and Vance especially. Vance actually, to give an idea of how intimate this assault on media feels right now, Vance just hosted the Charlie Kirk show after Kirk's assassination, and on the show he made a point of attacking The Nation magazine, where I write, and attacking a piece it ran that dared to tell the truth about who Charlie Kirk was, a right-wing bigot, basically, and just laid that out and said, like, we don't have to mourn this guy. And Vance, attacked it, and also just blatantly falsely claimed that The Nation is funded by George Soros's Open Society Foundation, which, there certainly are left-wing publications that are, but The Nation is not one of them. But it's not like anyone ever corrects that. I mean, Vance just says whatever he wants. So, I mean, we're living in a post-truth environment, and they're not just attacking, it's a war on immigrants. It's a war on the most powerful TV stations and the biggest names in TV. But, I don't think little left-wing magazines are being spared either. I think that everyone's speech rights are under threat right now.
I sort of know the answer to this question, but I'm curious as to how you perceive it. I mean, you're a journalist. You write about this, Bari Weiss, because there is value in people understanding where she comes from, how she functions within the context of our media and political landscape. What outside of that? And that's the reason why you write this stuff. But how should people use this information? Like, what value does it have in the context of dealing with what's coming, what exists now, and in what's coming?
Well, I ask myself that all the time, and I guess the most baseline answer is that we tell the truth because someone has to, because there has to be a record of people saying these things and saying this was wrong, that will inspire somebody or that someone can draw on someday. I have no idea what the immediate plan to stop any of this is. I mean, I'd like to think that TV networks will start to show some spine, because ultimately I don't know how they're supposed to run. I understand that they don't want to lose their licenses, but I don't know how they're supposed to run viable businesses if the administration can just kick anyone they want off the air. I mean, they're ultimately in the business of finding audiences and making money, right? And I'd like to think that Democrats will show spines as well, which is a few of them do, and that we will still have fair elections, and the tide will turn again. I want to believe that's all still possible. I'm not ruling it out, but I do, at the speed at which they are consolidating power and destroying like the normal levers by which let's say, Richard Nixon was contained 50 years ago. Actually, I just, apropos of Robert Redford's death, I just rewatched All the President's Men for the first time in a while. So did a few friends who work in media. And we were talking afterwards. First of all, it holds up great. It's a really good movie still. But second of all, you watch it and you're like, oh, wow, a newspaper could like systematically expose corruption and wrongdoing and take down the president of the United States who's spying on his political enemies. Like how quaint that would matter,
well, that's the thing. I feel like there are papers who would do the same thing.
Yeah.
And
they do it all the time.
They do it all the time. And then by like, okay, it comes out on a Thursday, by, Friday, it's like, we've moved on to some other thing. I mean, that's
you watch that and you see like, it's not that Nixon was a better guy than Donald Trump or a more honorable guy than Donald Trump. He's probably smarter, but never mind that. What was different was institutions mattered in a different way. The public, had a certain amount of trust in institutions to betray. They could trust journalists when they didn't trust the president. They trusted the president to hold himself to a certain standard of conduct, which was then he was exposed not to be doing. And even the Republican Party had a breaking point, in senators and so on, where they're like, we're not going to stand by this guy, which means that, real journalism could make a real difference. And now it's like, now everyone wants to be Woodward and Bernstein, probably more than Bob Woodward does. And it doesn't make a difference.
It doesn't register.
The public trusts us less than Donald Trump.
We should say Nixon did get the Smothers Brothers pulled from the air with CBS. We should just say this. I mean, they could be, but it was not part of a whole, a seemingly whole. I mean, Kimmel just seems to be the latest, right? I mean, we saw this with Colbert, and we see this with Kimmel, and also how naked
Fallon and Myers off the air too. And
what's that?
He just on Truth Social from Britain the other day, he was like, "Great news! Colbert's down, Kimmel's down. Now we just have to get rid of Fallon and Myers." Who
does he really want to get rid of Fallon? But I mean, for that, putting that aside, he's been calling it out. Right. I mean, he's been doing a lot of like Babe Ruth, like next up here. And then everybody's just sitting by. I mean, this is the part that is so insidious, is that everyone, all of the layers of this who could have pushed back at any given time, successfully or unsuccessfully, have not. The capitulation has come preemptively in every stage. Now, CBS, the executives at CBS may see it as capitulation, but Ellison, the politics may just be like, yeah, I'll get this guy off my air. And so, from their perspective, it's just like, I'm just working hand in glove with this. It is bad. It is bad right now. And the thing is, saying right now is almost mitigates how bad it is, because this isn't necessarily finite at all.
No, there's no reason to assume normal guardrails apply to apply us. I often find that people who I don't think of as patriotic or jingoistic or whatever, but still have sometimes a deeper seated sense of American exceptionalism than they even realize. Like even people who are very far left and anti-imperialist and so on, sometimes on some level, I think just believe that like there are guardrails here that that don't exist elsewhere. And I've been skeptical about that for a while. I'd say I'm more skeptical about it than ever. I hope it's true, but we'll see. I mean, with this Guardian piece, I certainly didn't think I was going to stop CBS from hiring Bari. I don't think I'm going to stop Bari from doing what she's going to do to CBS, although I guess I could flatter myself that I at least, I would say the best I could have done with this article is I hope it educates people across liberal media circles, don't treat this person as a joke or as someone people just like to gossip about. Like, she is really insidious. She is really censorious. She is not someone, she's charming to a lot of people personally, but she's not someone to be trusted. And it's going to have a real effect on CBS, which people should watch out for. So I'm glad in that sense the piece traveled and people saw how this works. And it turned out to be very timely. The piece dropped the morning before Charlie Kirk was shot. And since then, we've had, a week of discussion about press freedom and the implications here. Bari's initial reaction was wall-to-wall hagiography of Charlie Kirk on the Free Press, which, I would argue definitely sets the stage, or helps set the stage. Lots of people are doing this for what the FCC is trying to do right now, even if she says, whoa, don't go that far. And I guess the other thing I hope the piece did, maybe, I'm guessing Bari saw it, and I'm guessing that it occurs to her, I need to prove this impression of me that I'm just a Trump servant wrong by, criticizing the administration sometimes, which is clever of her, and I don't trust it for a second. But, I guess we shouldn't rule out that there are still some people who feel some sense of shame sometimes, even Bari Weiss, and some,
And yes, and I think I think that might be generous, but I'm in a charitable mood. Also, I think there's like a dynamic, right? I mean, she didn't raise the enormous investment that was put into her Substack blog. It didn't come from her bank account. Whatever it is, Freedom University or Prager
the University of Austin, which she co-founded. Yeah.
Yes, that also. It came from a set of donors who she probably and patrons.
UATX was funded at least in significant part by
Harlan Crow.
Harlan Crow, who also was Clarence Thomas.
Thomas's guy. Yeah. I mean, so there has to be, and these people are not one-dimensional. These I would imagine for her image is, her sensitivity to her image is a direct result of what her sensitivity to her donor set and to those people who fund her and expect returns and expect her to maintain a certain veneer that is important for whatever their job is. So good. I guess, that makes her curb a little bit of thing, but a very important piece, David, really well done. Really appreciate you coming on and telling us about it. We, of course, will link to that piece in The Guardian and to your work at the Nation and Jewish Currents. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Great to talk to you,
David.
All right, we've got to take a break, head into the so-called fun half of the program, wherein we will have fun. And it'll be just about half, almost to the minute. So that's pretty good. Hey, folks.
I think it's good.
Folks, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show, free of commercials, but you get the fun half. And you help this show survive and thrive. Hairy times, ladies and gentlemen. Getting a little, it's a
Thanks
little.
to Nutrafol.
Yeah.
You can't make fun of anything.
Comedy's not legal.
It's like legalized comedy.
Oh my God.
The left wanted to make comedy illegal.
Oh God. We need to have that be like the first button in the order because of how much they're gonna try to say
you can't make fun of anything.
Consequence culture instead of cancel culture. Oh yeah, consequence culture, huh?
Wait till you hear what Kayleigh McEnany has to say
Oh
about
my
this.
God.
It's beautiful.
Things
Making
are
Dakota proud.
my point is things are getting hairy around these parts, and it is it doesn't have to be us, but support. Of course, we would love it, but support people who are trying to provide you with a narrative that is not bought and paid for by an increasingly sort of like oligarchic elite, and with a political a specific political disposition. That's going to be I haven't over the course of my career really appealed to that notion as much, because at times it was sort of cringy. Independent media is important without a doubt, and we've definitely had media consolidation, but we're moving into have moved into, I should say, a different era, one that I don't think is going to get better soon.
Jeff Bezos came, Bill Gates came.
I think it's going to get a little bit worse, frankly.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, what are you going to do? Also,
Watch Harry Emden.
we're going to get increasingly
There'll be no show. It'll just be soundboards.
we're going to be increasingly, yes, what do you call it? Giddy over the course of the, it's sort of that, there's not going to be
You are
much.
having an emotional breakdown right now.
Yep. All right. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee. They're a co-op in Madison, Wisconsin. They got the Majority Report blend. Check them out. But they also have a bunch of other great coffees. And use the coupon code Majority, get 10% off. Matt, Left Reckoning.
Yeah, Left Reckoning had a great show. Brian Meir on talking about Brazil and Bolsonaro getting put in prison. Look at that. Somebody facing consequences for coups. Also, Tamanisha John talking about the shooting gallery that is the Caribbean and why Caribbean governments are basically just okay with it. Saying, hey, maybe give us a heads up next time you blow a fishing boat out of the water. But most importantly, and this is clipped on the YouTube channel of Left Reckoning, Tom Alter, people are calling him the Jimmy Kimmel of Texas State socialists. He's a tenure professor at Texas State who has got fired now because a speech he gave, a pretty anodyne speech for a socialism conference over Zoom, was clipped by a Jan Sixer who has appeared on Dave Rubin's show and also said Hitler was going to heaven because he lived his life with some sort of intentionality. It's pretty out there sort of stuff. She got this professor fired, so I'd like more eyeballs on that, particularly if you're in Texas. Just outrageous McCarthyism, Trumpism, I guess we could call it now, a period we're living through.
Alex from Atlanta writes, day one of advocating to call the fun half the done half because we are cooked. Folks, we will see you in the fun half.